Hey guys, Jasmine here from Feeling Nifty Painting Tutorials, and today you're going to learn how to paint this beautiful beach sunset painting. So let's get started. So the first step is we want to divvy up the canvas into 3 equal parts. So we're just going to take a ruler, and I have a 9 by 12 canvas, so I'm going to make my first line about 4 inches down. So each section is going to be about 4 inches. Take your ruler, your pencil, and we're just going to make a straight line right across. So that's going to be the horizon line, and we're going to make another line about 4 inches down from that one, and that's going to be the line where the ocean meets the shore. Okay, so now we're going to paint the sunset sky. So we're going to pick up our flat brush, we're going to wet it just a little bit in water and wipe off the excess water on the side of our jar. And then we're going to pick up a little bit of that ultramarine blue on our brush. Just like that, just a little bit. And then we're going to paint the top portion of our sunset sky, and that's going to be our darkest color. And we're going to be using these back and forth strokes. Now, using these back and forth horizontal strokes here ensures even application of our paint. So you can apply a little bit more if it's a little bit transparent. So we're going to paint it about an inch down from the top of the canvas, because the next color is going to be our pink in our sunset sky. Just like that. And then without cleaning off our brush, we want that blue on our brush. We're going to pick up some of that fluorescent pink on our brush. And that helps with blending paint, is having the previous color that we want to blend with already on the brush. So it blends on the brush and on canvas as well. So we're just going to take that fluorescent pink and we're going to pick off where we left off with that blue, with those same horizontal back and forth strokes. So if we run out of that pink, we're going to pick up a little bit more, and we're going to bring it about an inch below where we left off with that blue. And another thing to note is when creating sunset skies and wanting to do even gradients, is to bring that color up into the original color, the color above. And that ensures it's not just blocks of color, not just like blue and pink. It's going to be that transition from blue to purple to pink. So we want to bring that pink up into the blue just a little bit with those same horizontal back and forth strokes. So pick up a little bit more of that pink to brighten it up. Just like that. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to clean off our brush, because what's going to happen if we pick up red now, the red, the blue, and the pink are all going to mix on the brush, and it's going to make like a muddy color, which is not what we want in a sunset. A sunset's a very bright and vibrant colors. So I'll show you what happened when I did leave the brown. When I did leave the red on the brush. It creates like a very muddy looking red. So to avoid that, we're going to clean off our brush. That, and our jar of water. I'm going to dry it off, and then while the paint is still wet, we're going to pick up some of the cadmium red, medium hue. And that's another key thing for creating even gradients and blends, is to work while the paint is still wet. Now, another trick, if your paint is drying out, because acrylic does dry really fast, which is one of its characteristics, is that you can use like a little mini mister or any type of water mister and just spray it lightly. So you can just very lightly mist it, and that keeps the paint wet and workable, so you can work those blends. So I've taken a clean brush with some cadmium red, and I'm going to use those same horizontal back and forth strokes where we left off with that pink. And we're going to take it about an inch down below the pink. And as I was mentioning before, to make that even gradient, we're going to bring that red up right into that pink. So it's a nice transition from pink to red. There we go. So you can see it's a nice vibrant, it goes from that pink to a nice vibrant red because we've cleaned off our brush. Okay, so now we have about an inch left to the horizon line. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna leave our whatever red we have on our paintbrush, and we're gonna pick up some cadmium yellow on our paintbrush, and that's gonna mix yellow and red together, mix a beautiful orange. So we're gonna take that yellow, and then we're gonna use those horizontal back and forth strokes to apply that yellow right below the red, right up until the horizon line. So we want to make an even transition between the red and the yellow, which is going to create that really beautiful orange. And then pick up a little bit more yellow, and we're going to add some more yellow towards the horizon so it gets a little bit lighter. And it doesn't have to be exactly perfectly straight, because we're going to come in the next step and add our ocean. Just as straight as you can get it. There we go. And that is our sunset sky. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna wait for it to dry, and then we're gonna come back to the next step, which is we're gonna paint in our ocean. All right, now that the sunsets portion is dry to the touch, we're gonna move on to the ocean portion. Now I have some teal on my palette, but we're gonna dull that a bit because it's super vibrant right out of the bottle right now. Because at sunset, there's a little bit less, it's like a softer light in the sky, and colors are not quite as vibrant. So to dull that teal blue, we're going to, what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab its complement color. So this is just a simple color wheel. And we have blue-green on this side, and its complementary color is basically the color right opposite to that color, which here on the color wheel, it is like a red-orange. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick up our palette knife, or you can use a brush too if you don't have a palette knife. And we're gonna pick up just a little bit, because we don't want to dull it too much. We want to add a small amount of color to begin with, and then we can always add more. So we're gonna pick up some red and yellow to make a nice red yellow. And then we're just gonna mix it in with that teal. So just a tiny smidgen of both colors. And that's gonna make a little bit duller version of that teal, which is what we want for a sunset ocean. Okay, so it is getting a bit duller, but we want it just a smidgen more. So I'm gonna grab a little bit more of that red, a little bit more of that yellow, and we're gonna mix it right in. And also to note, with acrylic colors, once they're dry, they often dry a little bit duller and darker than when they are wet. So keep that in mind as well. So about a shade or two darker when they're dry. So when you have a nice muted teal color, then you're just going to put your palette knife down. So that one's good. I'm happy with that. Put our palette knife down. We're gonna pick up our same flat brush, which we used for the sky, and we're gonna make sure it's nice and moist. And then we're gonna pick up some of that muted teal. And then we're going to paint in the center portion of the canvas, which is gonna be our ocean. So we can start at that horizon line. And we can try to get it as straight as possible. It doesn't have to be completely straight. Just do your best. And you can always flip over the brush too to use the chiseled side to get a straighter line. Just like that. And sweep it across. And pick up some more color once your brush kind of runs out. And sweep it. Oops. Just like that. And now you can just use those horizontal back and forth strokes just to fill in the center portion. It's a nice tropical sunset water. I often call this water Windex colored water. The tropical water is that color. It reminds me of Windex. Go, and then we're going to paint that all the way to that, that pencil mark we made in the first step, which is going to be our shoreline. And the next step, we're going to mix our sand color. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that this ocean color doesn't dry out completely, because we want to blend that sand, that the part where the ocean meets the sand, we want to blend those two colors together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my mini mister, or if you have a water mister, that works as well. And you're just going to lightly mist the bottom portion. You know, the top portion of the ocean can definitely dry. It's just this portion right here we want to keep a little bit workable. So just like that. And so right now we can move on to the next step while this is, well, we don't want it to dry. So we're gonna move on to the next step, which is gonna create our sand color. So sand color is basically a brown that's really light with white. So what we're gonna do to create that is, we're not gonna use it right out of the tube. We're gonna create it with the colors we already have on our palette. And so to create a brown, we're gonna mix all of our primary colors, which is blue, red, and yellow. And then to lighten it up, we're gonna use white. And that's gonna create a beautiful sand color. So we're just gonna clean off our palette knife, and then we're gonna pick up a little bit of blue. We're gonna have actually, to create a really nice warm sand color, we're gonna have a little bit less of that blue in that mix. So it's not gonna be exact portions of red, yellow, and blue. We're gonna have a little bit more of that red and yellow compared to that blue. So we're gonna pick up bigger splotches of that red and yellow. So I would say 2 parts red, 2 parts yellow, and 1 part blue. So once you have that there, we're gonna just mix it with our palette knife. And it's gonna create a really nice deep brown. And then to lighten it up, so it's a sand color, not mud color, we're going to add a little bit of white. So we're just gonna add it on the side at first, and we're gonna mix it in slowly. So there's a little bit of white, and then we're gonna grab just a little bit and see where that takes us. So add a little bit of white, and we're gonna lighten it up. So that's still looking more like mud than sand. So we're gonna grab more white. Just gonna keep adding it until it gets to a nice sand color. So I'm also noticing that it's more on the red color, on the red side. So I think I'm gonna add in a little bit more yellow into the mix, just to give it more of a beige, a sunny, warm sand color. So you can play around with the proportions of the yellow and the red into your mixture to get that nice warm sand color. So add in more white. And adding yellow into your color also lightens it up as well. That's a bonus. And we're gonna pick up our clean flat brush. And we're gonna pick up that sand color with our brush. And then we're gonna continue off with where that we finished with that water. And that blue should still be a little bit wet because we misted it. So you can see it blending with that nice, beautiful sand color. So we're gonna use those horizontal back and forth strokes and bring that sand color just a little bit up into that ocean. So there's a nice even gradient. Like that. And then we can pick up more of that sand color. And if you find there's a little bit of the teal on your brush and it's muddying it up just a bit, then you can just go ahead and clean it off once you've created that transition between the blue and the sand color. Okay, then we can pick up some pure sand color. And we're gonna use those back and forth strokes to apply it all the way to the bottom of the canvas. Just like that. And in the next step, we're actually gonna have a little bit of fun with our sand. We're going to add in some texture. There was someone in my Facebook group, which I'll put in the description below, that really enjoyed, I did a previous painting with a sunset, sorry, with a beach scene, and they really liked the sand texture added, so I thought I'd add it to this one as well. There we go. So while it's wet, I'm just gonna go grab a little bit of salt in a bowl. All right, so for the sand texture, what we're gonna do is I just added a little bit of normal salt into a bowl, and we're gonna sprinkle it. We're just gonna take our hand here, and we're just gonna sprinkle it onto that wet sand paint. And when it dries, it's gonna give a really cool sand bumpy texture. Now you can definitely buy, there's different mediums you can get that work with acrylic, and some of it, so the one that gives that sand texture is called pumice gel. But it often costs, it's not cheap basically, so you can create that texture at home by just adding salt into your paint. It's like that, and once you're happy with the amount of salt you've added, what we're gonna do is just to seal it onto the canvas to make sure it doesn't flake off once it's dry, we're gonna take our brush, and we're going to take a little bit more of that sand color, and we're just going to go right over top of that sand, that salt, and then you're going to see that texture being brought to life even more when that paint meets the salt. It's a really, really cool texture, and it was free. The best part. And now the sand is done. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna wait for it to dry. And then the next step, we're gonna come in and we're going to paint in our sun that's setting. Now for the next step, we're going to paint in our sun that's setting at the horizon. So we want to make sure that the sky and the ocean part, the top part of the ocean part, is dry to the touch. And once that is, what we're going to do is we're going to trace in a half a circle. So you can grab anything that's nice and round around your house. I just have a candle here, and I'm going to grab a pencil and I'm going to put it down. So basically the circle is going to be half above and half below the horizon, and it's going to be roughly in the center. You can measure it as well. I measured it beforehand, so it's nice and centered. And then we're just going to trace it with a pencil. Just makes it easier to get a nice half a sphere. Just like that. Okay. So now, to make the color of the sun, we're going to mix a little bit of the yellow, the cadmium yellow, with white, because we want it to stand out in the sky. We don't want it to be a very vibrant yellow, which we have in the sunset already. So to create that, it's going to be like a kind of like a pastel yellow. So we're going to take just a smidgen of that yellow and a lot more of that white. And we can play around with the proportions. So I'd say start out with triple the amount of white compared to your yellow, and see if that creates a nice pale pastel yellow. So that's looking nice and pale, but I want it to be a little bit lighter than that. I'll show you here the color that I'm aiming for. So it's a really pale pastel yellow. So I'm gonna add a little bit more white to that mixture. So I'm gonna put down that palette knife, and we're gonna grab our round brush, and we're gonna make sure it's nice and moist with water, and we're gonna wipe off the sides off on our jar. I'm gonna grab some of that pale yellow paint, and we're just gonna fill in the sun basically. I like to do the outline of it first, get as close to the edge as possible. And so I'm using just the tip of the round brush, almost using it like a pen to get a really crisp line. And it also helps too not to grab too much paint on your paintbrush. You want it just to be a little bit of paint, otherwise it gets all gloopy and it's hard to create those really crisp edges. And you can also, if you find your paint is a little bit thick, because that also makes it a little bit gloopy, you can thin it down with a little bit of water so it's a little bit more fluid and it flows easier from your paintbrush. And if you find, like how I did here, that the line is a little bit wavy at the horizon, and you want to crispen that up, what you can do is you can grab a Q-tip, just a simple Q-tip, have a little bit, tiny bit water on it, and then you can just clean it up a bit, just like that. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna wait for that to dry, and then we're gonna do another coat of that pale yellow paint just to make it more opaque, because you can see some of that sunset behind it showing through. So to make it dry faster, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna grab my hair, like a normal hair dryer, and just dry it. Now once it's dry to the touch, we're gonna grab a little bit more of that yellow paint, and we're just gonna give it a second layer. So our sun is complete. So now while we have this color that's still wet, we're going to go ahead and paint in our water, our sun reflection in our ocean. So we're gonna switch brushes here. I'm gonna clean off that one, put in my water. And we're gonna grab our small flat brush, and we're gonna make sure it's nice and, actually, you know what? We're gonna have it dry, because having a dry brush often gives a really nice effect, which I think will look actually really good with the water reflection. So we're gonna keep it dry, and we're gonna grab a little tiny bit of that same pale yellow, and we're just going to use the chiseled edge of the brush, and we're gonna create some some sun reflection lines in our nice ocean. Just sweeping it right across like that. So we're gonna start closest to the horizon, which are gonna be the widest reflections. So and then we're gonna taper it off. So the next lines, and they don't have to be all completely straight, they can be kind of broken up lines like that. It's gonna be slightly shorter. And then we're gonna do the same thing going downwards. So it's gonna be kind of like a triangle like that. You can add some on the outside too. Really pale ones once we don't have a lot of paint on our brush. And also, if you find it not bright enough, you can wait for some of the lines to dry and then go right over top of them and make them a little bit more brighter. You can play around with the waves here and add a little bit more to your liking until you're happy with it. That's the most important thing, is that you're happy with your composition. Go. All right. So once you're happy with the water, the sun reflection in the water, we're gonna create our stars in our sky. So to do that, we're gonna grab a little bit of white paint, and we're gonna thin it down quite a bit. So we're just gonna create just a tiny little like drop of white paint. We don't need that much because we're gonna use a lot of water to thin it down. So to create a nice thin paint, we want to make sure that the water we have is nice and clean, because the water, if it's like a dirty jar like this with other colors in it, it's going to muddy up that white. So I'm just going to go quickly and grab some fresh water. Okay, so I have some fresh water here, and then I'm going to grab any brush and just drop some water right onto that white. And the consistency we want for these splatter stars is like a thin, soupy consistency. So not completely liquid, but like a thin soup. So it's a nice flowy, so you can lift up your palette and it should flow. That's really fluid. And if you find it's too thin, then you can always add in a little bit more paint. So that's what I'm gonna do. Add a little bit too much of that water. There we go. Quite as easily. So let's lift it and tilt it, and that it's flowing, but it's not just pouring down. So that's a nice consistency right there. And we're gonna do is we're just gonna take that same brush, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a piece of a scrap piece of paper, and I'm gonna cover this half of the sky, because I want the stars just to be at the top of the sky. So I'm just gonna take a piece of scrap paper and cover the bottom so that the stars just focus on the top part. So I'm gonna just load up that brush with that liquid paint. Then I'm gonna grab another brush here. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna have fun here, and we're just gonna tap that brush on that second brush. And it's gonna create these really fun splatter stars. I love this method. And it gives a nice, with stars, to get like realistic looking stars, it's good to get a variation of the sizes and the spacing. And when you do the splatter method, it does it automatically. And it's just fun. The one thing though is it is a little bit messy. So if you have a table where you don't want your surface, you don't want paint to get on, you just need to cover it below before doing this method. And don't wear your favorite dress. There you go. You can get some bigger splatter stars too. There we go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take off that scrap piece of paper, and so you see the stars are focused towards the top of the sky. And if you want to come here and fix it up, you can do that as well. You can grab just a little bit of a Q-tip, and if you want a little bit less of those stars, you can just smudge them a bit, or just leave them as is. There we go. Just a big splotch. Okay, so we have some nice splatter stars there, and that's going to dry. So the next step, once the whole canvas is dried, is we're going to learn how to paint in silhouetted palm trees. So the color we're going to need is Mars Black. So I have a little bit of Mars Black on my palette, but what we're going to do is, because we're going to be creating really fine and thin lines, we need a lot of control with our strokes. So I have this tube paint, which tends to be a little bit on the thicker side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thin it down so it's not quite as clumpy and thick. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to it and thin it down. Now, if you're already using like craft paint in a bottle that's already thin, you don't need to thin it down anymore. You can just use it as is. But if it's in the tube like mine, you can add just a little bit of water and thin it down. Not quite as thin as that white paint. We don't want it to be like fluid, like when you tilt your canvas that it flows, but just a little bit thinner. So when you're grabbing it on your paintbrush, it flows a little bit like thick ink. So that's a good consistency. Just gonna load it up by twirling my brush in the paint and not having too much paint on my brush either, just a thin layer of paint on the brush. And then we're gonna create basically the skeleton of the palm tree to begin with, and then we're gonna add detail and build it out. So we're gonna have two palm trees. One is going to be kind of pointed this direction, and one's gonna go up, one's gonna be a little bit taller. So let's start with that taller one, and we're just gonna create this stump of the palm tree. So it's gonna kind of bend inwards towards the center of the painting, about right there. Just a simple line. And then the second one is going to be a little bit shorter, and it's going to stem out right from the same place as the other one, and it's just going to go right into the beach area, kind of bending inwards as well. So those are our basic stumps, and we're going to build those out in later steps. So now we're going to be painting in the skeletons of the palm tree fronds. So to do that, we're just going to start at the end of our stump, the top part of our stump, and then we're just going to create these like little swooshy lines like that. And it kind of is reminiscent of spider legs. So they're going to be a little bit curved, and don't be scared to make them a little bit longer. It's always nice to have big, dramatic palm tree fronds. That, so I've done 3 there. I'm gonna do another one kind of going on the opposite direction to the left of the canvas. Make it a little bit longer, go. Then I'm gonna do another, and it all kind of stem from a center point too. So imagine there being like a center dot there, and they all kind of start at that place. So this one, I'm gonna make it go like that. And then the last one here. And you can choose as many fronds as you want. If you want to have 6, if you want to have 5, if you want to have 7, you can choose that number. There we go. So that's our tallest palm tree, and now we're going to work on the shorter one. So that one we're going to add the same thing, these spider leg-ish strokes. That. Paint another one. That. Maybe another one going down, a little shorter one. Okay, so basically that's the essential skeleton of a palm tree. Now when you break down more complicated subject matters into its very simple shapes, it's easier to often paint and recreate. So now we're going to build out this palm tree now that we have the basic shape. So to do that, we're going to load up our brush, and we're going to make sure we don't have too much paint on it, because this is going to be a little bit finer of a stroke. And then we're going to build out these palm tree fronds, the leaves of the palm tree. So to do that, we're going to use these little, basically these feather-like strokes, short, quick, downward and curved strokes, reminiscent of like a feather almost, all the way down those lines that we've made. That. And then we're going to do the same thing on the top of that line. So there's going to be these little feather strokes at the bottom of each line and also at the top of each line. So we're going to do the top now. And they're going to go out and kind of curve down a bit in the opposite direction. That. And this painting is actually inspired by my son. He was home one day on a sick day, and he was inspired to paint, and he wanted to create a beach sunset. And he did a fabulous job, and basically this painting is in honor of him and his amazing talent. Thank you, son. Okay, so now we're going to continue the same technique for these palm tree fronds with all the lines we've created. So now I'm going to move on to this line over here. Oops, my paintbrush fell. I'm a little bit of a clumsy person. All right, blue on my hand too. So I always thought palm trees were quite intimidating to paint. This is the first, when I was, when my son painted this painting, and then I knew I had to paint palm trees, I was a bit hesitant. I'm like, oh no, I've never painted palm trees before. And then I watched some amazing YouTube videos from fellow artists, and they broke the palm tree down into a very doable method. So thank you to them. And it just proves that anything, when you break it down to simple shapes, it becomes so much easier to recreate and paint. Go. Even us painters who paint more often, we get intimidated too by new topics, new subject matters to paint. I think it's a human nature thing. And I always find painting in a silhouetted version of anything always makes it easier to paint as well, because you're not so worried about the different colors, the shades, the highlights. It's just black and you're just focusing on the form of the subject matter and not all the other details of it. This is actually can be a great way if you want to learn how to paint palms realistically. Painting in just a simple structure and taking a silhouetted approach can be a great way of just focusing on the form first, the shape, and then learning about the different colors and shades and highlights that go into making a palm tree more realistic looking. And you can always add in more palm. If you find like your palm tree looking a little sparse when you're done all the fronds, you can always add in more afterwards as well. Like here, I'm thinking I might just add another one at the end because there's a lot of space between these two. Just kind of go with the flow. Who feels like having a nice tropical drink right now while you're painting this? And what is your favorite tropical drink? You can comment down below and let me know what your favorite drink is. Mine, I like all of them, but if I had to pick, I think it would be a margarita. There's something about that fresh lime and the tropical vibe. And the beauty with tropical drinks too is that you don't actually need to add any alcohol to them because they have so much flavor to begin with. So you can create really great mocktails with tropical drinks. Okay, I'm gonna add in, I think, another shorter frond over here. Go. And now I'm going to focus on the smaller palm tree here, so I'm just going to add in my feathered like strokes. Oops. Okay, so once you're happy with the palm tree fronds that you've painted, now we're gonna thicken up the stump to make it look a little bit more realistic. So with palm tree stumps, they're often thicker at the base of them towards the ground, and then they become more tapered and thinner towards the top of the tree. So we're just gonna thicken them up. So I'm gonna start with this shorter one over here, just thickening the stump. The bottom, and it doesn't have to be completely straight, can be a little bit wobbly. There we go, that's one. And you can always go over it with more black paint if you've missed some spots. And then we're gonna do the taller one over here. Just thickening up the base of the stump. a little bit thicker here. Okay. Go. So our palm trees are finished now. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to be painting in a nice beach umbrella with 2 chairs. So to do that, we're going to pick up the same paint, the same thin down black paint we used for the palm trees, and we're just going to grab some on our brush, and we're going to create just the simple straight vertical line of the umbrella to begin with. And we're going to remember also we're going to have 2 chairs. We're going to have a chair on either side to leave enough room on either side of that line. So I'm going to put it right over here, and I'm going to make it go all the way up right into the blue ocean part, like that. Simple line. And then we're going to use a similar stroke where we created the feathered like look for the fronds, and we're just going to do these sweeping down motion like that to create a nice tropical straw umbrella, beach umbrella, just like that. So bring some of that same stroke from the palm trees over into the umbrella as well. I'm just going to make that umbrella line a little bit longer because I've made the top a bit bigger than to get the proportions looking good. There we go. Nice wide tropical umbrella. And now we're going to paint in 2 nice chairs on either side of the umbrella. So you can just imagine yourself going on that beach, sitting down, grabbing a nice drink, and watching a beautiful sunset. So to make these chairs, we're gonna break them down to simple shapes like we did with the palm tree. So to begin with, we're just going to create a shape kind of like that, like a rounded window. We're gonna do the other chair at the same time so we can keep them relatively the same size. They don't have to be exactly the same. 2 different kind of styles of beach chairs would be cool too. Like that. And then we're going to create the armrests, which is just going to be a horizontal line on either side at the base of that shape we just created. That. Thin horizontal line. And then we're going to create kind of like a trapezoidish shape, so we're going to bring it down on an angle, and then a nice little curved up detail like that. Do the same thing on the other chair. And that curved line, that. And now we're going to make the legs of the chair. So to make that, we're going to do the back leg first, which is going to be a slanted line, simple line down like that on either side. So it's going to be slanted outwards. Same thing for the other side. That. And now, a little bit. Just use a Q-tip to clean up the edges there. Now we're going to create the front part of that leg. So it's the front leg on the chairs. Now that's going to be a line that's pointed towards the middle, and it's going to be shorter than the back leg. So it's going to give that illusion of depth and dimension, just like that. And the other chair. That. And now we're going to fill in that shape that we created in the last step. Other shape here. And then we're gonna create the slats at the back of these beach chairs by just putting in some simple lines like that. Okay, there you go. And this painting is complete. I hope you enjoyed this tropical beach painting, and until next time, sending you lots of peace, love, and color.